Stay with us till the end for valuable insights. Like, subscribe, and share to support the channel. The night was silent, but fear was loud. A young woman stood in the dark, her hands shaking, her breath shallow. She did not know why the dogs were barking. She did not know why the men were running. She only knew that something terrible was coming. Moments later, fire split the night. Screams followed. Homes burned. Families broke apart forever. This was not war. This was hunting. For countless African women, life did not end with death. It became something far worse. Their bodies were taken. Their names were erased. Their futures were sold like objects in a market. Chains replaced freedom. Fear replaced hope. History often speaks in numbers, dates, and empires, but it rarely speaks about the women, the girls, the mothers who were dragged away while their children cried behind them, the silence they carried, the pain they were forced to survive. They were not seen as human. They were seen as profit. This story is not comfortable. It is not heroic. It does not offer easy villains or simple endings. It is a story of greed, power, and a system that fed on suffering. A system that did not just kill people but broke them slowly every single day. And the most horrifying truth? For many women, death would have been mercy. What you are about to hear is not meant to shock. It is meant to remember, to give voice to those who were never allowed to speak, to look directly at a past that still whispers through the present. This is not just history. This is a warning. It usually began at night. African villages were quiet after sunset. Fires burned low. Children slept close to their mothers. Elders whispered stories they had told many times before. Life was hard, but it was familiar. People knew their land, their seasons, their songs. Women worked all day, fetching water, grinding grain, caring for children. And at night they rested, believing morning would come as it always had. But for many women, that night became their last moment of peace. The attack did not come with warning. Armed men moved fast and silently. Some came from far away. Others came from nearby kingdoms. They carried weapons bought from foreign traders, guns, blades, chains. These weapons gave them power, and power made them fearless. Homes were set on fire first. Smoke filled the air. Confusion spread. People ran without knowing where to go. Men who tried to defend their families were killed quickly. Children screamed. Mothers tried to gather them, but chaos ruled everything. Women were the main targets. They were grabbed by the arms, by the hair, by their clothes. Some fought back. Many were beaten until they could not stand. The attackers tied their hands behind their backs or forced heavy wooden sticks around their necks. Anyone who resisted too much was punished in front of others. This was done on purpose. Fear made people obedient. Young girls were pulled away from their mothers. Wives were dragged away from husbands. Pregnant women were not spared. Age did not matter. Beauty did not matter. Only one thing mattered: how much money a body could bring. By sunrise, the village was no longer a village. It was ashes and silence. The women who survived were forced to walk. Long lines of captives stretched across the land. Chains cut into skin. Feet bled on rocky paths. Anyone who fell behind was beaten. Anyone who collapsed was left to die where they fell. No burial, no prayers, no goodbyes. Along the way, the women were treated like animals. They were not called by their names. They were counted, inspected, and argued over like goods. Traders checked teeth, skin, arms, and legs. A woman's pain did not matter. Her tears meant nothing. For many, the worst part was not the physical suffering. It was the knowing they would never see home again, knowing their children were gone forever, knowing their lives were no longer their own. Some women whispered prayers in languages the traders did not understand. Some stayed silent, saving their strength. Some looked at the ground, afraid that if they met another captive's eyes, they would break. This was only the beginning. What waited ahead, markets, inspections, forced labor, and endless abuse, was far worse than the journey itself. But in that moment, walking in chains under the burning sun, one truth became clear. Their freedom had not just been taken, it had been erased, and the world allowed it to happen. The chains were never removed. They stayed on during the day and at night. They stayed on while walking, while resting, while sleeping on cold ground. Heavy iron rings pressed against skin until wounds formed. When the women moved, the chains moved with them, making a sound that followed them everywhere. A sound that reminded them they were no longer free. After days or weeks of walking, the captives reached trading camps and markets. These places were not hidden. They were open, busy, and loud. Men talked about prices. Animals were traded nearby. Food was sold. Life went on as if nothing terrible was happening. For the women, this was where their bodies truly stopped belonging to them. They were lined up in rows, told to stand straight, told to be quiet. One by one, buyers walked past them. Hands touched their arms, their faces, their backs. Mouths were forced open so teeth could be checked. Hair was pulled aside. Clothes were removed. There was no shame for the buyers. There was no protection for the women. Being looked at was not the worst part. Being judged was. Strong bodies were worth more. Younger women were worth more. Women who looked healthy were worth more. Those who cried too much or looked weak were beaten or ignored. Some were marked for hard labor. Others were marked for something else. The women did not always understand the language spoken around them, but they understood enough. They understood when someone laughed. They understood when someone pointed. They understood when money changed hands. In that moment, they were no longer daughters, wives, or mothers. They were property. Many women tried to disappear inside themselves. They stopped reacting. They stared at nothing. This was the only way to survive the inspection. To feel nothing. To be nothing. Those who resisted were punished quickly. A strike, a kick, a public beating meant to teach others a lesson. Resistance did not bring freedom. It only brought pain. After the sale, the women were separated again. Friends made on the journey were torn apart without a word. Sisters who had survived together were sold to different owners. Promises whispered in the dark were broken by force. Some women were taken to homes, others to farms, others to ships waiting near the coast. No one explained anything. No one cared if they understood. That night, many women lay awake, staring at unfamiliar skies. They wondered if their families were alive. They wondered if anyone would remember them. They wondered if their gods could still hear them. For some, hope was already gone. They had learned a terrible truth. The chains were not just on their bodies. They were on their futures. And what came next would test how much suffering a human soul could endure. The trade did not survive on cruelty alone. It survived because it made people rich. Behind every chain and every market stood a system built on money, power, and fear. The women who were captured were not taken by accident. They were taken because they were valuable. Their suffering had a price. Foreign traders wanted labor. They wanted servants. They wanted women for domestic work and for pleasure. They arrived with silver, gold, cloth, and, most dangerously, guns. These goods were offered in exchange for human lives. Slowly, some African kingdoms began to change. At first, raids were small, a few captives here and there. But as weapons became more available, leaders saw opportunity. Guns gave power. Power brought control over land and enemies. And the easiest way to get more guns was to sell more people. Villages that once lived peacefully near each other became enemies. Old alliances broke. Suspicion spread. Anyone could be a target. Anyone could be sold. Raiding became business. Young men were trained not to farm or build, but to hunt other humans. Women became the easiest targets. They were less likely to fight back, easier to control, more profitable in the markets. Kings and chiefs told themselves stories to sleep at night. They said the captives were criminals, or outsiders, or enemies who deserved their fate. These lies made it easier to continue. Soon, entire economies depended on the trade. If raids stopped, weapons stopped. If weapons stopped, power stopped. If power stopped, kingdoms fell. So the raids continued. Places like the Kingdom of Dahomey and the Sultanate of Zanzibar became major centers of this trade. Markets grew larger. Routes became more organized. Camps were built just to hold captives. Ships waited along the coast, ready to carry human cargo across deserts and seas. The women trapped inside this system saw its effects clearly. They noticed how guards treated weapons with care but treated people with violence. They saw leaders argue over prices while captives starved nearby. They learned that their pain kept the system alive. Some women were forced to work immediately, cooking, cleaning, carrying water before even being sold again. Others were held until prices rose. They were investments, not people. The cycle fed itself. More weapons led to more raids. More raids led to more captives. More captives led to more profit. And profit silenced questions. Those who tried to speak against the trade were ignored or killed. Fear ruled everything. Greed followed closely behind. For the women, this knowledge was crushing. They were not trapped by one man or one group. They were trapped by an entire world that chose money over humanity. And as long as that world existed, there was no escape. For many women, the journey did not end inland. It moved toward the coast. Zanzibar became one of the most important centers of the trade. To outsiders, it looked like a place of beauty. Blue water, white buildings, busy ports. Traders spoke many languages. Ships came and went. Wealth flowed through the streets. But beneath that surface was a world built on suffering. Women arrived in chains, weak from hunger and long travel. Some had walked for months. Many had watched others die along the way. By the time they reached the coast, they were shadows of who they once were. They were taken to holding areas near the markets. These places were crowded and filthy. There was little water, little food. Disease spread quickly. No one cared. If a woman died, another could replace her. Markets were held openly. Women were lined up again, just as before. Buyers inspected them carefully. Some were local. Others came from far away. Each buyer had different needs. Some wanted domestic servants. Some wanted laborers. Some wanted women for their private homes. The women never knew which fate awaited them. Silence became a survival tool. Those who spoke too much were beaten. Those who cried too loudly were punished. Slowly, many women learned to hide their emotions. Their faces became empty. Their voices disappeared. This silence was not peace. It was protection. Behind closed doors, the reality was worse. Many women were forced into lives of constant abuse. They worked from sunrise to night without rest. Food was given only to keep them alive enough to work. Illness was ignored. Pain was expected. Their bodies were controlled. Their movements were watched. Their futures were decided by others. Some women were forced to bear children they did not choose to have. These children were often taken away, sometimes sold, sometimes used as servants themselves. Motherhood became another form of suffering. The women learned not to hope. Hope made the pain sharper. Days turned into years. Years turned into lifetimes. Many women died without ever hearing their real names spoken again. They were remembered only as property, if they were remembered at all. Yet even in this darkness, something remained. Memory. Women whispered songs from their homelands when no one was listening. They remembered stories their mothers told them. They remembered the feeling of freedom, even if only in dreams. The system tried to erase everything they were. It did not fully succeed, but the cost was unimaginable. The trade did not slow down. It grew stronger. Every weapon that arrived made the next raid easier. Every successful raid proved that violence worked. Slowly, entire regions were reshaped by this system. Villages were no longer safe places to raise children. Roads became paths of fear. Night became something people prayed to survive. African women lived with constant danger. Even those who had not yet been captured felt the weight of the trade. Mothers slept lightly, listening for sounds outside. Young girls were hidden when strangers passed through. Families moved often, hoping distance would bring safety. But safety was becoming rare. The demand never stopped. As long as buyers wanted labor and control, traders supplied it. As long as weapons brought power, leaders kept raiding. The system fed itself without mercy. Women who had already been enslaved saw new captives arrive again and again. Fresh faces, fresh fear, the same broken expressions. Some tried to help the newcomers quietly, showing them how to avoid punishment, when to stay silent, how to survive another day. Others could not look. Watching reminded them of who they once were. The cycle reached deep into African societies. Trust disappeared. Neighbor feared neighbor. Sometimes villages attacked each other just to avoid being attacked first. Survival replaced morality. And at the center of it all stood women, used, traded, and discarded. Their suffering was not a side effect. It was the fuel. The more unstable a region became, the easier it was to take captives. The more captives were taken, the more weapons arrived. The more weapons arrived, the more unstable the region became. There was no end in sight. Some women tried to escape. Very few succeeded. The land was unfamiliar. The punishment for capture was brutal. Others chose to endure, hoping for a moment of weakness in the system that never came. Time blurred. Days lost meaning. Years passed without markers. Women aged quickly under the weight of labor and trauma. Youth was taken early. Strength faded. When a woman could no longer work, she became invisible. Some were abandoned. Some were left to die quietly. Some were replaced without thought. And still ships arrived. Still markets opened. Still chains were locked. The trade did not ask who suffered. It only asked how much could be gained. This endless cycle crushed generations. It stole futures that were never allowed to exist. And it left scars that did not disappear when the chains finally did. Because even when the trade weakened, the damage remained. The trade eventually slowed. Ships stopped arriving as often. Markets lost their power. Kings and traders found new ways to survive. But for the women, the end of trade did not mean the end of suffering. Many had lost everything. Families, homes, and communities were gone. Their children had been taken or sold. Their bodies carried the marks of years of labor, abuse, and forced pregnancies. Their minds carried memories too heavy to forget. Even freedom came with a price. Some women returned to villages that no longer existed. Others found families who could not recognize them. Others stayed in new lands, strangers among strangers, learning a new language, new customs, and new fears. Their lives were rebuilt slowly, painfully, with every memory of the past following them. The physical chains were gone, but the chains of fear, grief, and loss remained. Some women chose to tell their stories. Quietly, secretly, to children or grandchildren, they passed down names, songs, and memories that traders had tried to erase. Others could not speak. The pain was too deep, the memories too sharp. Through these stories, the world learned something important. The slave trade was not only a system of commerce. It was a system of destruction. It did more than take bodies, it took identities, cultures, and futures. It reshaped entire continents and left scars that echo through generations. Yet even in this darkness, there were lessons. The resilience of the women, their survival, their quiet resistance, became a testament to human strength. Even when treated as property, even when forgotten by history, they found ways to endure. They carried memory as a weapon against forgetting. They kept alive the voices of those who could no longer speak. And though the cruelty was unimaginable, their courage was undeniable. Today, when we remember the women of this trade, we remember more than suffering. We remember survival. We remember resilience. We remember a warning. Human lives are never meant to be commodities. The cost of treating them as such is immeasurable. The women's pain may have been ignored for centuries, but it still matters. Their stories still whisper across oceans, across deserts, across time. Their voices, once silenced, demand to be heard. And in remembering them, we honor the strength it took to survive what was worse than death.